Today is Sunday, June 19th, 2022, and we have the results of the Colombian presidential election, the second round, which was held today between Gustavo Petro and Rodolfo Hernandez. Gustavo Petro winning the majority of votes in the presidential election and will now become the next president of Colombia. Petro becoming the first leftist president of Colombia, and a very significant political change for the country. New York Times here noting the first leftist president. Here you can see Petro and his vice presidential candidate Francia Marquez celebrating after winning the election today in Bogota, the capital of Colombia. Petro's victory really comes after a significant number of events over the past 2 to 3 years in Colombia. Colombia facing significant poverty and inequality that were exacerbated by the pandemic, and that led to protests in 2021 after the president, who's currently the incumbent president and the outgoing president, Duque Marquez, had sought to introduce increased taxes, and he was attempting to reform the healthcare system, and this led to mass protests in Colombia, and an effort to stop those reforms from coming into place, and eventually they were successful in stopping those reforms from being enacted by the president. The president backed down, and we're really seeing the cascading of effects of these protests and of the actions of President Marquez in Colombian politics. Marquez was a conservative in the mold of Uribismo. Uribismo being the political ideology of former President Alvaro Uribe Valdez. He came to power in 2002 in the 2002 presidential elections, and Duque is essentially someone that was mentored by Alvaro Uribe. Duque Marquez, also a conservative politician in Colombia. He opposed the agreement with the FARC guerrilla group, and notably Petro, who won the presidential election in Colombia, was a former fighter for a guerrilla group. But nonetheless, a lot of public dissatisfaction now with Duque and with Uribismo in its entirety, just not being a palatable political philosophy anymore in Colombia. And we saw that quite significantly during the first round of the presidential election in Colombia. The conservative candidate Federico Gutierrez, with running mate Rodrigo Lara Sanchez, running with the party Queremos Colombia, we believe in Colombia. They did not make it to the second round of the presidential election. Instead, you had Gustavo Petro with his historic Pact for Colombia, a left-leaning political party, as well as Rodolfo Hernandez and his League of Anti-Corruption Governors, organizing themselves as essentially an anti-establishment, anti-corruption group of parties. And that is a rebuke to the team for Colombia, for Queremos Colombia, the conservative ruling government and ruling political class that have governed Colombia essentially for the past 20 years. And now we see here, after Uribe, after Duque, we now have Gustavo Petro, a far-left president, coming to the presidential office in Colombia. Francia Marquez also making history. She'll become the first black vice president in Colombia, and that is significant for Colombia. What with the significant poverty in the country, and the significant economic effects of the pandemic over the past 2 years, showing that despite that, she overcame, and that the leftist government of Marquez and of Petro are going to be much different than Uribe and Duque in terms of confronting poverty and the economic circumstances of the Bolivian, or rather of the Colombian people. In terms of what Gustavo Petro has vowed to do, one of the main things he's vowed to do, and which Duque partially did in response to the protests last year, is that he wants to make university education free in Colombia, and just a bunch of other myriad reforms in an effort to lessen poverty, to lessen inequality, and really as a response to those protests last year, to ensure that the government is working better for the people, or at least in their vision. You can even see here in terms of the choice that Colombians had today, choosing between an ex-guerrilla in Petro, who wanted to transform the country into one that does more for the people, versus Hernandez, who was running as an anti-establishment candidate, but who was also a construction magnate and who was under construction, a millionaire. The economic differences between the two really proving to be a stark contrast, and Petro's candidacy ultimately resonating the most with Colombians. It's not to say that it wasn't, or rather that it was a decisive victory for Petro. It was a very close election. Petro winning by around 600,000 to 700,000 votes over Hernandez, but nonetheless, a decisive victory for the left, a symbolic victory for the left, and a very significant victory for Colombia's left, as they now look set to take the presidential office in Colombia, to enact policies that are completely antithetical to the Uribismo of the past 20 years, and to really realize some significant economic changes in the country that run contrary to the political establishment, the conservative political establishment that have been in power for so long. So that is the update here from Colombia on June 19th, 2022. Significant changes in the country, and we'll have to see how that translates when Petro becomes president of the country, when he's inaugurated. Thank you.